What a wonderful day to be out on the bank. We're on the River Soar. We've got a little midweek knock up. We're pegged on the Barrow deep section. And I'm here today because we've just got back from England duty in Serbia, which is pretty full on. And I thought I'd come fishing with my mates. We've got Joe Oakes further down. We've got...
Come to abuse me, haven't you, Rob?
Mr. Smiler, Dan Hull. Here, what peg's this? 3?
5.
5. I'm
You're
on 3. I'm on 3. Look, fish topping already, look.
Solid.
This isn't your normal place, is it, Dan?
No, I don't really know what I'm doing. I rang my mate Steve Porter up.
What's he said?
He said someone won the match here about 20 years ago.
Right, so you fancy it?
Yeah.
Right, superb.
Big popcorn down there.
Right.
They might catch 10.
Your head's gone. Right. It looks like you got similar gear set up to me. We'll have a walk back to my peg now the sun's come out. Right, see you later, Daniel. Good luck. I've just borrowed a bait dropper off Daniel because all my kit is still all over the place. I've not transferred it all over yet, but I thought it's going to be a lovely day. A couple of my mates fishing the match. The river's in good condition. We'll come and have a day just to blow a few cobwebs away. I mean, look how beautiful it looks, all the lily pads. There's AD Reynolds, look. Master of the Soar. Got my work cut out. If I can beat AD, I think we're in a good position today. That's peg 4, and you can just see my kit up here. I've drew this peg a couple of times in the past, and as I remember, it plumbs up ever so awkwardly on the long pole, which, to be honest, doesn't worry me today because I'm not going to be fishing long pole. I'm going to be fishing pretty positively. So we've got feeder rod set up. As you can see, the peg over there, we've got a nice bush. We've got all that pennywort weed sticking out a long way. I've had a chuck with a bomb over there. It seems to be reasonably deep. It's not full depth of the river, which is ideal for bream, but it seems pretty deep over there. So I think that's my feeder chuck towards the edge of that weed over there. And then I'm going to fish down here, 7 metres out, chopworm and castor. I'm going to bait drop some worms in with that bait drop I've just borrowed off Dan. Then I'll loose feed casters over the top, something I love doing. So we've got our feeder rod. We've got our ground bait, swim stim green, swim stim black, mixed together. Perfect. You know, we've not gone for a natural bait, we've gone for, sorry, a sweet mix. We've gone for a fish meal mix because we're fishing for big fish. We've got some casters. Now I picked these casters up this morning from Bennett's of Mount Sorrel, and they are beautiful. Fantastic casters they are. We've got our worms, we've got a few maggots, the hook baits, and that's about it. I had some red worms as well, but they seem to have died whilst I've been away in their pillowcase. So we've got dendrobinas, and that'll do us. Right, let's have a look at the setup. We need to colour this float in as well while we're at it. So we've got 0.8 float. It is about 8 foot deep on my short pole line at 7 metres. Got 0.8 float. I like these sort of slim rugby ball style floats for my river fishing. 0.8 float, that's going to be my lighter rig. That's got a bit more of a strung out pattern, shotting pattern, and smaller hook that's got an 18 on to 08. That is my roach rig slash perch rig when they become a little bit wary. Now we've got our chopworm rig, or our starting rig. This might be double caster, little bits of worm, a bit more aggressive. So we've got bigger droppers, we've got Olivet there, and the float, hopefully we can see that, 1.5 grams. There's not much flow at all, but I just feel that we need to be a bit more positive, get the bait down as fast as we can. It's nice and relaxed today. We're starting at 11:15, so it is a relaxed day. I think target weight could be anything, £30 if the bream feed, £10 if they don't. Wish me luck. Now, chopworm is a great starting point on the River Soar. or any river in fact, there's loads of small perch, big bream like it, you might catch a bonus tench, roach love the bait. So I always feel that a couple of bait droppers, chopworm is a great place to start. It's a great bed as well to loose feed my casters over later in the day. So at 7 metres, 2 small bait droppers of chopworm. Dan, further down the bank, kindly lent me a bait dropper. Thank you very much, Daniel, otherwise I'd be really struggling. To be fair, the flow wasn't too strong in this area. I was able to hold bottom with a 0.8 flow in around 7 to 8 foot of water. So 2 of those bait droppers, finely minced worm, a few casters, gone in at 7 metres. After feeding my pole line with that chopworm, I felt I needed to put some bait in on a feed line. Just up against that far bank weed, a really good depth of water, probably about 3, maybe even 4 metres deep over that far side. Perfect area if there's any bream going to feed. I felt that is the place to be. So, wasn't intending to start on the feeder, but I wanted to feed some bait there, ready to drop on it after an initial flurry of the hoped for perch. So, 5 or 6 feederfuls of my ground bait mix, swim stim green, plus some swim stim black, a few chopped worms, a few casters, fed onto that far bank line. Hopefully that would do the trick in holding any bream or skimmers that might want to settle on it. I feel that on a lot of natural venues, chopworm is an instant bait. By that I mean I want to capitalise on any fish that comes to that bait straight away. I think fish home in on worm almost straight away as soon as it goes into the water, and you can catch some really early fish by doing that. So I wanted to make sure I was fishing that short pole line as soon as possible. Nice big tail of a dendrobina worm was my hook bait. I'm fishing the positive rig. It's a 1.5 gram float. It's a size 14 hook, fishing 012. It's positive. Now if I hook at any size of fish on this river, barring maybe a big carp, I feel like I've got a chance of getting it out. So this first drop in could tell me a lot about the day. If I catch a bream here, well, it could tell me that some bream are feeding. If I catch some perch, that's great, and that is my target species. That's what I expect here. But who knows? Could be roach, bream, skimmers. But as is usually the case, this time a greedy little perch of about 2 or 3 ounces takes the bait. A great start, because at least it tells me that some fish are feeding, they're willing to come to some bait. This short line seemed to be a good place to start. I'm getting plenty of little perch, roach, I'm getting bites, and looking along the bank, the anglers that I could see, they were casting feeders out looking for an early bream, and no one seemed to be hooking there. So I've already got it in my mind that maybe today isn't going to be a bream bonanza, or if it is, we might get a late arrival from those fish, and if that's the case, obviously that bait I put in on the far bank could come into play. Now, along with the roach and the perch, we've also had a couple of surprises. We've had a couple of skimmers, one about 10 ounce, one about 6 ounce. Great little bonuses when it doesn't look like many anglers are catching many fish at all. Now you can see, we've got the coat on. The weather conditions today are very changeable. The sun's in and out of the clouds. We've had some drizzle, we've had some heavy rain, we've had some bright sunshine. It's one of those days. I always feel that when I've caught a bigger fish, I need to top up. So I've not topped up yet on this line. I've relied on that initial feed, but I've just had a nice skimmer. I feel like I need to top the swim up. So just a little blob of chopworm, a few casters, maybe 20 or 30 casters, gets bait droppered into the swim. Regular top ups, quite often, when you're fishing with a bait dropper, you can get a bit lazy. You neglect putting the bait dropper in the swim, you feel like you're going to spook the fish, or it just seems a little bit too much hard work to do that. But in my experience, doesn't spook the fish. And as we know, regular topping up of the swim, little and often feeding, is often the best practice. I've now scaled things down bait wise. Quite often, early on, you can fish a big bait, catch those suicide perch, those early mugfish that are willing to chase a bigger bait. But now a few silvers are starting to show. I think a smaller bait's the way to go. 2 little bits of worm or 1 little tiny bit threaded up the shank, that is working really well. I'm still on the big hook, I can still fish aggressively, and obviously when you're fishing worm, you can usually get away with heavier gear. So I don't think anything of using that size 14 hook. I'm covering most of the hook with little bits of worm. Dendrobinas are a great bait. You can split them off for you now. Put 1 little bit on, 2 little bits on. Silvers love them. Quite often over the years, anglers have shied away from using worms on natural venues, thinking that they're only going to catch perch. But using smaller bits, you can catch loads of roach and little skimmers with the bait. With an hour and a half gone and bites starting to slow down on the short line, it's time to try the feeder. Now, I've got about £3 in the net. Some chunky skimmers, chunky perch, chunky roach. I feel like I've got a chance of catching a big fish on the feeder. No one else has caught a fish, by the way, on the feeder. I've not heard of any big fish caught in the whole match. So, I'm hoping that my bush and weed combination over that far bank is going to hold some fish. Started off, little tiny feeder. 15-gram feeder. There's hardly any flow on the river whatsoever. I've got my rod quite high, so I'm keeping as much of my braid out of the water, which means there's less drag on the feeder. Hopefully, I'm not going to pull the feeder out of position. The plan is, I've fed an amount of bait at the start, and I'm going to chuck my little tiny feeder over the top. Try and cause as little commotion as possible, and try and nick an odd fish that's settled over that bait. Felt like I'd done everything right on the feeder, but unfortunately the only bite I've had on the feeder is this massive crayfish. When I first hooked it, I thought it was a foul hook fish, but as it got closer I knew something was up, and as it popped out of the water I couldn't believe how big it was. Absolutely massive. I've managed to shake it off the hook, but I feel that if there's a crayfish or two there, I don't think there's any other fish there. back on the short pole, and by now I'm loose feeding casters by hand. 10, 15, 20 casters every time I lay the rig in. There's plenty of bleak in the swim, there's some small roach. I need to feed some bait that's going to get through those fish, actually make it to the bottom. So quite aggressive with the feed. I plan on getting through probably around a pint and a half of casters throughout the day. You need to make sure you're feeding enough bait to give yourself a chance of catching a bonus perch or maybe even a tench later on in the session. I've found through experience on this river that if you just go easy on the feed, you just never pin the fish down. Even though it's fishing harder than we expected, I still feel you need to feed every single time you lay the rig in. Keep those fish active in the swim, and then by fishing that lighter strung out rig, you can fish through the water, vary your hook baits and make the most of your swim. By altering our feeding pattern and our rig, our depth, our shotting patterns, we've managed to keep fish coming on a tough day. We've even took bleak today, such has been the difficulty of the session. We've had a bonus perch though take a single caster, about 12 or 14 ounce, a great scrap on light gear. Single caster, by the way, has been the best bait. Burying the hook in the caster has made a huge difference as opposed to leaving it exposed. You miss a few bites doing that, but the amount of bites that we've got by burying it has far outweighed hitting a few extra bites. So 7.5 pound has been our final weight. A tough day, but that has been enough for second in the match. Great down the river. The match was won today by Adi Reynolds. Adi's managed to find a bit of flow and have 14 pound of hemp roach, a great weight on a tough day.